All right, folks, so the government of Jamaica has denied asylum to the 37 Haitian migrants who arrived in Jamaica by boat in July last year. The Haitians were handed the rejection letters last Tuesday, February 27. Their attorney and founder of the Freedom Imaginaries human rights group, Melanie Alain, will be appealing the government's decision. She's actually in Haiti right now and joins us via Zoom to discuss the process. Good morning, Melanie. How are you? Welcome to Smile.
Good morning, and I'm actually in Jamaica right now.
Oh, you're actually in Jamaica. All right. Well, that's good news. You should be in studio with us if you're actually in Jamaica. The government of Jamaica, do they not have the right to decide who comes to the country, who stays in the country, and who doesn't stay in the country? Don't they have that right?
So, yes, but remember, every decision that any state organ takes must be in strict adherence with, the Constitution and the rule of law, and with international law obligations. And those obligations are very clear when it comes to migrants seeking refuge at your shores.
And this might be taking it somewhere else, but you keep hearing about the drugs for guns and things coming from different countries. And some of the reasons given is because we think some of these people who come in might not be the kind of person, the kind of people we want in our country. Is that a good argument or no?
Well, every country across the world will have to make decisions in times of crisis and intense and complex security issues. I mean, we have Israel with what they would say is, they are taking actions in self-defense. But in reality, they're, killing babies. In Jamaica, we're saying that, Haitians are coming to Jamaica and there's this concern about drugs for guns. But at the same time, every decision and every action must be in compliance with the Constitution. It must be in accordance with the rule of law. And so while I understand the security concerns, we have a Constitution and we have international law, and all actions of the state must comply with those laws. And so what I would say to the government is I think there is a solution where we can balance between security interests and, the fundamental obligation to respect human rights, and find a solution that does not compromise the Constitution and that does not erode the rule of law. Because once you start eroding the rule of law and the Constitution, you are going down a path, a dangerous model of decision-making that will have implications for all Jamaicans.
Okay.
Many Jamaicans may not be familiar with the process of seeking asylum and how it works and how a government determines who it will grant asylum. Share with us a little bit about that. What is the Jamaican government, or describe that process, that the Jamaican government undertakes?
So asylum in Jamaica is governed by a refugee policy, a 2009 refugee policy, and that is grounded in the convention, the Refugee Convention. And what it says is that, persons who are fleeing persecution have a right to seek asylum. And one of the most fundamental obligations is the prohibition of what you call refoulement. And that is when you send someone back to a place where they could face persecution. And so one of the most important things to do under this regime of refugee protection is to set up a procedure and a process whereby vulnerable migrants can access a refugee status determination procedure where their international protection needs are assessed and then addressed. But what's happening in Jamaica is that, they're not getting access to a refugee status determination process. And the only group that has been able to access it so far, which is the 37 that, have applied for asylum, they have been subjected to an asylum procedure that we are determining to be so unfair as to be unlawful, because it doesn't have basic procedural guarantees. And then those procedural flaws expose applicants to refoulement.
And on what grounds are you filing an appeal of the decision of the Jamaican government to not grant asylum to these 37 Haitians?
Well, each case will turn on its own, facts, and I don't want to get too much into the facts of each case. But, we have to remember that these are applicants that didn't even have an opportunity to appear before the eligibility committee that was convened to consider their applications. These are applicants that received a decision letter that was not written in their native language, and that in our view was not sufficiently reasoned in that it did not provide sufficient information and reasons as to why their claims were not accepted. And these are applicants who, went through an interview process with immigration officials where they didn't even have an opportunity to fully express their stories. And so what we're seeing is an overwhelming record of non-transparent decision-making and procedural flaws that, in our view, have compromised the integrity of the decision.
So what were they told by the government? What were they told why the government is saying you have to go back to Haiti?
Well, these are very formulaic letters that are essentially the same, except what they did was they picked out, in one case, I counted the words. They took out 7 words that the applicant said in an interview and said, this was the basis for your asylum application. And then they said, violence in Haiti is concentrated in Port-au-Prince, therefore there's no for your claim. And so already we see that there's an issue because right now we have UN bodies saying that violence in Haiti is intensifying and expanding. We have news reports, whether it's from CNN or human rights bodies like, Human Rights Watch. We have so much information on what's happening in Haiti. And by all indication, it is catastrophic. It is escalating. It has been compared to war zones and armed conflicts. And so what I would say is that, I understand the security concerns of the government, but we do have international law, we do have a constitution. And so let us engage together to find a solution, because what I don't accept is this unilateral decision-making. We have to have a conversation around this, and we have to build some consensus about what the Constitution requires and what the rule of law would require.
Yeah. I'm not certain if you could tell us everything, but you keep saying that there are laws and stuff. So is there a suggestion here, or maybe even more than a suggestion, that the Jamaican government, they are breaking laws by not accepting them? And if so, can you tell me 1 or 2 or what they're doing that you think is against the law?
Well, I've always been very clear in my articulation that, I consider the government to be violating international law, and that would be the Refugee Convention, which prohibits refoulement, which is the return of persons to a place where they could face persecution. And one of the requirements, that obligation entails a requirement to establish an effective asylum procedure, which, is governed by procedural safeguards that would prevent refoulement. Contrary to that standard, what we have is an asylum procedure where the most basic requirements of due process and fairness have not been met. And so the applicants in the initial phases did not have access to legal representation. They don't have access to basic information about their case, such as the composition of the eligibility committee that reviewed their case and the recommendations that were made. They don't have access to their application documents. And so I am looking at decisions that I don't even know how to challenge because I don't know what the information was that informed the decision. And so I want to move now from international law to just bring it to our own constitution, because our constitution is also very clear. Our constitution sets out certain due process guarantees, which don't seek to establish a specific outcome in every case. What it wants to do is establish a process. And that's why we call it guarantees. And so even in this case, Freedom Imaginaries isn't even saying we want certain outcomes. At this point, what we're saying is that we want a process. We want a process in which each applicant can have an individualized assessment of their case, grounded in facts and evidence and grounded in the law. We just so happen to believe that when you add the evidence of what's happening in Haiti with the legal requirements of asylum, you have an inevitable conclusion that you simply cannot return Haitians to Haiti. And this is exactly what the United Nations has said in its non-return advisories.
Allow me to play devil's advocate, but before I do, I hear you mentioning solutions, and I do suppose that based on what you've put forward, that some of those solutions to this issue will come through the due process to which the Haitians are entitled under international law. And we are also neighbors, really. But here's the devil's advocate question. Does this not open the door for, or open some kind of potential floodgate? Once let's say we get to the end of this due process and they are allowed to remain here as refugees, then aren't we now opening our shores to a flood, so to speak, of Haitians seeking, a means of escaping their situation?
Yes, and I understand those concerns. And what I always like to do when faced with complex issues is to just go back to first principles. First principles are, like concepts like dignity and due process and procedural fairness. And these are such beautiful words because, in the face of complexity, we just have to ask ourselves, what does the Constitution require? And so, yes, granting asylum to a group of people in this context could open up the floodgates, as people would want to say. But they've done it for other migrant groups. For Venezuelans fleeing persecution, they have established procedures where they can access territory and, get access to humanitarian assistance. I have never once heard any argument about floodgates when it comes to Venezuelans. When Ukrainians were fleeing persecution, the international community came together and put in place mechanisms. I didn't hear one argument about opening up the floodgates. And so I have to ask myself, why is it that when we seek to establish protections for certain people, the floodgates argument comes up, but when we seek to establish protections for other people, it is a sterling example of, what the international community can do to protect human rights and all of these things. And so, we just have to be careful about what the real issue is. Is the issue our concern about floodgates, or is our concern about something else?
Yeah. This might be an unfair question. I don't know if you've ever gone through what we were talking about before, whether successfully or not, but how do you feel about the process? How do you feel speaking to us now? Do you think the Haitians will be granted asylum?
This is a very difficult question for me because the decision is out of my hands, and by every indication, there's nothing that I can count on and feel sure of. The Constitution and the rule of law are supposed to give you that certainty to say that no matter what happens, we have, a line that we will never cross. But unfortunately, what I'm seeing in Jamaica now is this continued disintegration in the rule of law. And so I feel like I'm in a state of free fall, and I'm not sure where we'll land. I don't know what is the limit of what, state entities will do in terms of their willingness to retreat from the Constitution and the rule of law. I don't know what path we're on and where that leads us. All I can say and all I can do is just urge the government in good faith and with all of the respect in the world to say, engage with us. Let us find a solution that's good and proper, because I think we inherently know what's right. Each human being, I think, has this innate ability to understand what is good and right and dignified. And what I can say is that by any standard and by any metric, how we're treating Haitians coming to our shores, it's not dignified, it's not good and proper, it's not fair. And so let's just do the right thing, Let's stand with Haitian refugees, let's uphold international law, let's preserve our Constitution, and let's just end this escalating cycle of migration-related abuse targeting Haitian migrants.
The Haitians should be very happy that you're in their corner. I just pray that the right thing happens. And to be fair, right now, I'm not certain what is the right thing. But I hope that happens. Thank you so very much for speaking with us. God bless you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Founder of human rights group, Freedom Imaginaries, Melanie Allain.
After the break, we'll be discussing with Nathan, his latest project. Don't go, I can't get that last name right. But please, stay with us on Smile. It's going to be an amazing interview.